Jim. Jim? Ted. Hey, listen. I can't get started, but I'll call my garage and get a shove. What? Oh, sure. We'll get out to the kickoff. Okay. Bye.
Hello. Oh, yes, Mr. Tracy. Well, we can get you started. I beg your pardon? All right, sure. We'll be there in a few minutes. Right away. Goodbye. Hey, Bill, Mr. Tracy can't get started. Run the truck over to this address and get him going. He's in a hurry because he's got quite a ways to go. He doesn't want to miss the football game today.
Okay, Mike.
Well, you got here pretty fast. Hey, you want to give me a push?
Why, no, Mr. Tracy. Let's have a look at her first.
Oh, you sure it won't take too long? Boy, I'm in a sweat to get away.
We'll get you going, all right. But we want to make sure you won't get stuck again along the way.
Hey, you know, I think it's that confounded automatic choke.
Oh, I'm not so sure, Mr. Tracy. Outside of poor adjustment or a stuck linkage, not much can go wrong with an automatic choke. Look, just like I said, this linkage is dirty and may be sticking. I'll clean it up, because that choke valve won't close enough if a linkage binds.
Well, okay, but don't tie me up. I got a guy counting on me for a ride to the football game.
Just a few quick checks, Mr. Tracy. We want to be sure you can get started after the game, too.
Well, what are you looking for now?
I'm working the throttle to see if your carburetor is delivering gas to the engine. Well, you're getting gas okay, so your fuel system's working.
Oh, I've got plenty of gas. I filled up yesterday.
Did you leave your car outside all night?
Sure. Why?
Well, it was awfully damp last night. Look at these spark plugs and wires. They're all wet. I'll have to wipe them dry. And the porcelains are pretty dirty. I'll have to clean them off.
Oh, well, why bother with that?
Well, water and dirt on the outside of plugs and wires lets the circuit short itself out. Then you don't get a spark where you need it.
Are you going to finish soon?
Pretty soon, Mr. Tracy. But this distributor cap's damp, and I've got to look at the points yet. Well, the cap's dry now, and your points look all right. So let's try starting her up.
Oh, swell.
Your battery's probably low, so suppose I hook up this booster battery. Then you can turn the engine over while I check to see if you get a spark.
Okay.
Your spark's coming through, but your starting motor doesn't seem to turn over fast enough.
Yeah, don't sound so fast to me either.
Well, let's put this distributor wire back on and start the car.
Good.
All right, now try it.
Boy, am I glad to hear that.
Well, you're all right for a while, Mr. Tracy. Your battery will charge up while you're going to the game. And I wouldn't use the radio until the battery's stronger. But more important, it'd be a good idea to bring your car in Monday morning so we can check it over.
Okay. I'll see you first thing Monday.
Say, Bill, Tom's got Mr. Tracy's car this morning. What did you do to it out on the road?
Well, Tex, I just wiped off the plugs and wires because they were all wet. The automatic choke linkage was dirty, so I cleaned it up. The points were all right, and the distributor had to be dried off. But when I hooked up the booster, Mr. Tracy's starting motor didn't sound too good.
Oh, his car isn't in such bad shape.
Yeah, but you should have heard Mr. Tracy yell. And can you imagine? He started cussing the automatic choke.
I wonder if he knows he's got to push the accelerator pedal about halfway down to release the fast idle cam.
Yeah, if that cam isn't released, the automatic choke won't even get started. There won't be any choke action at all. You know, if people would only realize how simple that automatic choke is, they wouldn't be so apt to blame it.
That's right, Tech. About all it's got is a solenoid, a bimetal thermostat, and the choke linkage.
Say, where'd you learn about the automatic choke?
Oh, it's all explained here in this reference book.
But don't forget, even though the choke's not complicated, you gotta be sure the rod doesn't bind because someone bent it. And it's easy to check that choke adjustment.
Tech's right. All you have to do to adjust the choke is line up the hole in the shaft with the notch in the base so you can insert this adjusting tool. If the choke valve closes tightly, you're all right. If not, loosen the clamp screw. Close the valve by moving the linkage, then tighten the clamp in place.
Another thing to check, Tom, is that gasket between the base and manifold. If it's not there, engine heat will affect the thermostat long before it should.
Yeah, and the clips on the linkage can be put on backwards. They're stamped left and right, but sometimes they're switched to make the linkage bind.
That's right, Tuck. And another thing you want to see is if you have a good ground through the mounting stud.
You can tell that easy enough by operating the starter and watching the valve snap shut.
Well, it does. So how about wheeling the quick charger over and charging up the battery?
Good deal, Tech. It's probably low. But let's see what the hydrometer says. All cells read a little low, but they're pretty even. They'll probably come up all right.
Uh-huh. Some of these quick chargers run a battery, don't they, Tom?
Oh, no, not if they're handled properly or if the quick charger isn't used repeatedly on the same battery.
That's especially true on an old battery. Whenever possible, put a battery on a trickle charger. Then you're sure you won't hurt it.
That's right, Tech. In Mr. Tracy's car, the battery's fairly new. He wants the car soon, so quick charging will take care of it.
I'm glad Mr. Tracy isn't one of those owners who puts in an undercapacity battery. It seems to me more people ought to know a battery's got to be at least the same capacity as the one that came with the car. But we won't get any charging done on this battery unless we raise the sea level in here. There's not enough water to cover the plates.
Okay, Tech, I'll squirt some distilled water in there, and we'll take advantage of the full plate area.
You know, maybe we ought to mention some of the battery care ideas in this reference book to Mr. Tracy. There's a good section on how battery efficiency varies with temperature.
Oh, I'll let Mike, the service manager, do that. Right now, I got to get these spark plugs cleaned and tested.
Oh, let me take care of those, Tom. Then I can check the whole ignition system while you look at the starting motor.
All right, Bill. But watch that pigtail on the condenser. Sometimes the insulation wears. That lets the wire touch the housing, shorting out the points.
Hey, we'll be shorting out some other good points on starting unless we turn this record over.
These plugs are all clean, checked, and reset, Tom. They tested out okay.
Good. I'll get this starting motor out and look it over. You take care of the distributor, the points, coil, and timing.
Okay, Tom.
Whoops. This thing's greasy. Almost slipped. I'd better take the inspection band off and look inside. This commutator certainly could stand some cleaning.
Sure could. You gonna tear the motor all down?
Yes. I want to check the armature and bushings. Could be this motor's never been tested.
Well, that's looking out for the customer's interest.
Yeah, I looked for broken connections or thrown solder, but this motor's okay.
This bushing's all right, too, Tom.
That's good. If the bushings were sloppy, the armature would rub up against the field poles. That'd slow down its cranking speed and pull more current from the battery than necessary.
Well, let's get the commutator cleaned up.
All right. I'll clamp it in the vise.
Here's some 00 sandpaper, Tom. Let's see how clean you get that copper.
Well, there you are, fella. Is that shine enough for you?
Yes, sir. That's a good job. Hey, Bill, Tom's getting off easy. If the bushings were bad and the armature rubbed, we'd have to check the field coils for opens or shorts and test the armature on the growler.
Good thing they're okay, Tech. Now that I'm done with the ignition, I'll check the brush holder springs and make sure the brush holders aren't cocked.
Swell. Then our brushes will seat the way they ought to.
Fine. I'll put in new thrust washers as I reassemble the starting motor. Then we can check the shaft end play.
What size washers you going to use?
Same as before. They should be all right. Look, Bill, we've got 15 thousandths play. That's well within specifications. So these washers are okay.
Good. Now I checked the starting motor switch, Tom. So let's bolt it back on and see if we can hit the right pinion clearance.
Oh, that'll be easy. Just screw this switch button in or out to adjust the pinion clearance to about 1/16.
That's easy on this manually operated positive drive motor, but it's different on the solenoid-operated positive drive.
How so?
Well, you have to adjust the solenoid plunger linkage so that its full travel gives you 1/16 of an inch clearance between the pinion and the drive housing.
If this were the Bendix drive used on some models, you wouldn't have any pinion adjustments to make.
Yeah, but you gotta be sure that the shaft threads freely in the pinion barrel.
Oh, yes, that's because the Bendix has to feed the pinion into mesh with the flywheel in order to crank the engine. If the shaft's dirty or oily, especially in cold weather when oil gets stiff, the pinion will spin without engaging the flywheel, even though the later type pinion has a weight added to the barrel to cause it to feed better.
You can put that barrel with the weight added to it on earlier type Bendix drives.
That's right. Now, on the positive drive motors, doesn't the pinion engage the flywheel before the starting motor revolves?
Yes, and on the positive drive, you can hold the pinion in mesh until the engine gets started because you have an overrunning clutch.
That's this part here, isn't it?
Yes, it behaves pretty much like the coaster brake on a bike.
I see. On the Bendix, when you start, the pinion kicks out automatically, right?
Right. In other words, we've really got 3 types of starting motors. 2 positive drives, manual and solenoid, and 1 Bendix drive. The manual positive drive depends on the driver's foot to engage the pinion and flywheel. The solenoid type uses electrical power. The Bendix drive depends upon the inertia of the pinion sliding on its shaft to engage it with the flywheel.
Okay, Tom. Now let's get back to this motor and give it a free-running test on the bench.
Oh, sure. I'll clamp it in the vise, Bill. You hook up the ammeter and the battery. Here goes.
That sounds good. What does the ammeter say?
70 amps. That's all right for this motor. But amperage draw varies with the different types of starting motors.
That's right, Bill. Now I'll put the motor in the car. Will you check the battery cables?
Sure. We don't want any extra resistance in the circuit.
And say, fellas, as long as the spark plugs are still out, suppose you pull that fan around so I can give the teeth on the flywheel ring gear the once-over.
Good idea. Well, Tech, how do they look?
Swell. Any tooth jockey would be proud of these nice-looking gear teeth. But did you know that on a 6-cylinder engine, for example, the pinion engages the flywheel in only 1 of 3 areas?
Oh, sure. That's because the stopping to rest at one of those 3 locations.
Say, Tom, when I checked ignition, I also checked the float level, cleaned out the float chamber, and wiped out the glass bowl on the fuel pump. I noticed there was some water in the fuel pump bowl. So we'd better tell Mr. Tracy to have his gas tank drained of any water before the cold weather really sets in.
Connect the quick charger, put back the plugs, and see how fast the starting motor turns over.
Okay, Tech.
Hey, that's turning over all right. But don't think you two are all finished.
We know. We got to check the fuel pump pressure and the compression.
And the engine oil, pal. If Mr. Tracy's the football fan I think he is, he'll be driving up north, where light engine oil's mighty important to quick starting.
That's right, Bill. In some places where the weather gets down as low as 10 below zero, it's even a good idea to thin out 10W oil with about 10% kerosene.
Good tip, Tech. Cold weather slows down the chemical action of a battery, so its efficiency is lower. And with stiff oil, a starting motor won't turn the engine fast enough to draw the proper fuel mixture for firing. That plus low voltage at the coil can cause poor starting.
Sure. That's why an engine should be serviced for winter before the first cool day comes along. Now let's button up this job.
Well, Mr. Tracy, I had 2 of my best men put your ignition, fuel, and starting systems in first-class shape. You remember Bill?
Oh, yes. Bill's the Johnny on the spot who gave me good, fast road service last Saturday.
I'm glad we were able to help, Mr. Tracy. Now, there's another thing we'd like to do for you. After we cleaned up the starting motor, we checked your engine compression. And we found compression low in a few cylinders.
Well, what does that mean exactly, Mike?
Well, with new rings and a little valve work on your engine, you'd get the compression you ought to have. Then, Mr. Tracy, you'd enjoy top engine economy and power, besides easier starting. Why don't you bring your car in again some morning? You can pick it up the next day.
Swell, Mike. You fellas are certainly in the habit of backing up what you say with good work. I'll bring my car in next Monday.
Don't look now, fellas, but you've just kept yourself another steady service customer. And believe me, that's going to mean more and more from now on.